You are now listening to the Add 10 Gallons Concrete Podcast.
Wait, the answer was add 10 gallons?
Add 10 gallons.
My first thought was we got to put Actigel in it.
Yeah, great.
Truck's on the way. On the way.
Yeah, okay. I've got two observations, neither of which are really educated or well thought out. Which are like most of my observations are.
There aren't a lot of problems on a job site that can't be solved with a sack full of biscuits.
Today's episode of the Add 10 Gallons Concrete Podcast is brought to you by Actigel 208. Actigel 208 is a high-performance additive for the concrete industry that is greatly beneficial to the producer. It enables them to increase the percentage of manufactured sand by up to 100% and completely replace all the natural sand in the mix. In areas where natural sand is scarce, inconsistent, and expensive, this provides a huge benefit to any ready-mix company out there. Benefits of manufactured sand and concrete include consistent air content, improved compaction, and increased density. Now, in the past, the downside of using manufactured sands was that they were hard to pump, hard to place, and hard to finish. Well, Actigel 208 solves all those issues. By improving suspension, stability, and the quality of the cement paste in the mix, Actigel overcomes the old issues with manufactured sand and leaves them behind. Let Actigel 208 improve the quality of your mix while saving money on every yard you produce. For more information, visit us at actigel.com. That's ACTI-GEL.com.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Add 10 Gallons Concrete Podcast. We appreciate you being with us once again for another episode. And just like always, I'm joined by Paul and Joey. Paul, what's up?
Great day to be alive. Great day to talk concrete.
Heard that. Joey, same?
Same. We're good. Let's get it.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to top that. We're like, oh, it's a great day to be alive. Actually, Paul.
Actually,
it could be. No, it definitely is. And we're going to get to it and all things related to it. Today, our guest is Eric Dixhorn from Brickeye Digital IoT. So we're going to talk technology in concrete, and we're going to talk concrete monitoring and concrete sensors. And let me stop you there. I did ask him the important question of what makes your stuff different than everyone else's stuff, and his answer was a phenomenal one. So you guys are going to have to stick around and listen to that.
Nice tease. Very well done. Very well done.
I got into Eric a little bit, man. I mean, he spoke super well, and he was giving me super logical, analytical answers to all my questions. And I'm like, listen, we like to theorize a little bit here. I just want you to guess about something. Everything so far has been based with statistics, and that's not all we do here. So.
Josh's conspiracy corner sign ready. He was ready to throw that up there on the wall.
Yeah, I should. I need to start doing that, like a Woody Page style whiteboard in the background, and be like, "This is what we're talking about today."
Yeah, you really should. There are some great conspiracies out there, and we've been reading up on a couple, and we're not prepared entirely to go into those yet. So we're gonna hold back. But there's a really good one brewing about the lumber industry and what's going on over there as they try to attack the concrete industry over carbon emissions. And so we're going to bring that to you in a future episode with a little bit more in-depth research and some sources. Maybe have some special guests.
Yeah, it's on our radar, but this isn't something we can just fly off the cuff with. We're going to come correct on this one.
Yeah, we could fly off the cuff.
Yeah.
But be a little bit, tad irresponsible. So we're going to head in a different direction. And today, I want to talk about a new technology that's out in the marketplace. It's from a company called Carbon Built, and they've got what they're calling Reversa. And this is a concrete curing system. So it actually works well for things like precast concrete blocks. They're trying to put embodied carbon back into the concrete pieces. And the very first person who has agreed to commercialize this technology is also the person who's the very first adopter of liquid Actigel, the product we sell, Matt Blair, down at Blair Block in Childersburg, Alabama.
Truly an early adopter. That Matt Blair is.
Truly the adopter. So I was actually hanging out with Matt last week, and I remembered that I had seen this article, and so I brought it up to him. I was like, "Man, you sure ain't scared? You'll take on anything, won't you?" And he just died laughing. He kind of lit up a little bit. He was like, "Yeah, man, got these PhD dudes down in Southern California." He goes, and they think they come up with this special thing. He goes, I saw it. He goes, man, I think it's real. He goes, I think it really does work. And he said, don't worry, we're still going to use all the Actigel. I was like, man, I really wasn't worried. He said that he really did take out like 80% of the cement in his concrete blocks, and the strengths are even higher than they were before. Densities are fine. Everything's fine. Man. And,
whoa.
I mean, 80% of the cement came out. And he said he thinks it probably could be 100% if you had the right other materials. But, I mean, he's constantly using waste and garbage, anything he can find to throw in a block. So he said if you had like a more conventional mix, I mean, it's possible. They could be telling the truth. It could be like 100%. But he took out 80% of his cement using Carbon Built's new system here.
So you'll have to expand on what that is. So is it a liquid? So what are we looking at here? If you're replacing 80% of your cement, like what are you adding to that block to make up that volume? Are you adding sand, or what's this carbon stuff here?
Yeah, so they're saying they're going to use CO2 emissions that are being derived from locally sourced forestry waste, and it's then being, well, I'm assuming liquefied, and they put in this special curing chamber, and they're injecting it into like the steam cure for those blocks, and all of that carbon is going into the block and mineralizing, and so you're creating that calcium hydroxide reaction inside of concrete block, and so you're getting that cement hydration reaction. You're getting the things you need in there to give you the strength. What surprises me, though, is that there's still enough paste to make paste aggregate bond so that these bricks can be made. But at the end of the day, I mean, water might be enough to do some of that, because people make mud bricks all the time.
Yeah.
So it could be that our thought of you had to have enough cement paste could be wrong in how we're thinking about making these blocks. But the cement was always needed for the strength of the block. So these guys have come along and said, well, now you don't need the cement for the strength. You just need to be able to make the block, and we'll get you the strength. So the Actigels help holding that block up high, and this new stuff from Carbon Built is giving it the strength.
Is this added this is added in the batching sequence?
No, it's in the curing
sequence.
It's in the kiln. They're building a new special kiln, so that's why he's not using it yet. He's signed the paperwork. He said it took a long time to negotiate the deal, but now that they put pen to paper, it's going to take 6 months minimum to get the new kiln built, get everything put in, get the CO2 sourced. They're not going to be starting until 2023 actually making these blocks.
Yeah. Well, Matt has some nice stuff down there as far as equipment goes and how they keep their plant. I mean, they got a pretty good operation, but there's plenty of old boys out there making block. They could use a new kiln anyway. So one that like seals properly, where the sprayers work right, and there's
seals it all. Yeah.
Thermostat. What?
Well, it's hotter in that room than it is in this other room, so
Yeah.
I reckon it's all right. It's 100 degrees in Alabama now. What do I need to?
I'm quoting directly here. We're in Florida. We don't need a curing room. Heard that one. I was like, oh, well, I guess it is humid.
That's pretty wild. I would be curious to see if they took 100% of the cement out and just see if Actigel stood that block up. I mean, because Actigel works, it doesn't have to have cement in anything. Actigel doesn't react with cement. I'd be interested in seeing all that.
Yeah, Matt told me that when we were hanging out or whatever, and he said, you should get in contact with these guys. He goes, I told them about y'all, that y'all could probably help them out getting that cement taken out even further. So, yeah, I think your head's right on track with what Matt sees, but we'd have to just get in touch with these guys to see what the world they actually have going on. But, dude, if Matt Blair thinks it's worth trying, then he put it through its paces. And
Well, the thing I wanted to talk about has absolutely no segue. Because what I want to talk about is, it's political, but political for a good reason. Like, I'm actually going to give a politician credit here for doing something. But what he's doing is essentially giving people without four-year college degrees opportunities at government jobs that previously required one. So we're going from a really interesting, innovative system made by some PhDs in Southern California to me saying, see, look, you don't need all those fancy degrees.
But this is interesting that we've advocated on here that there's a lot of jobs out there that can be done without a college degree. So why saddle somebody with $100,000 worth of student loan debt for a degree they really don't need once you get out there and you can just get trained on these jobs? And now we have someone who's in a real position who heard our podcast apparently, and he's done exactly what we've asked.
Yeah. So apparently Governor Hogan of Maryland listens to our podcast all the time. And shout out Governor Hogan, who probably isn't listening to this, but it'd be rad if he was. but yeah, we are of the micro mentality here of you should be rewarded for hard work, not how long or how much you've studied over a 4-year period of time. So recently, Governor Hogan of Maryland announced the elimination of 4-year degree requirements for thousands of state jobs. He was joined by the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Labor and also the CEO and co-founder of Opportunity at Work, which is a nonprofit that they were working with for this. And that was where a lot of the statistics and everything came from the Opportunity at Work nonprofit. And of course, anything political has to have a catchy tagline, and you have to, you know, how they called people dreamers and things of that nature. So they identify these people, albeit these people meaning qualified individuals without a 4-year degree. They identify them as stars, right? So stars stands for people who are skilled through alternative routes, which, I mean, all right.
It sounds so degrading, like condescending. Oh,
you're stars.
Bless your heart.
Yeah.
I'm just skilled through an alternative route.
I am for sure going to use that in an insult soon.
But anyway, I mean, in the announcement, Governor Hogan said that currently the state of Maryland employs more than 38,000 people. And through this program, they've identified that more than half of those jobs can substitute relative experience, training, community college education, trade school education, things of that nature. So at least half of those 38,000 jobs shouldn't require your standard typical 4-year diploma. In order to qualify to be a star, I gotta find a way to say that without sounding condescending.
Yeah, you're laughing. Oh yeah, as we're saying it.
In order to qualify to be a star, you have to be 25 or older and currently active in the labor force. So, with that being said, there's probably a lot of people out there who could qualify or will also soon qualify that they're not even registering right now. But you need at least a high school diploma or equivalent and develop skills through alternative routes. On-the-job training is really what they're looking for, but even like military service, boot camps, apprenticeships, it all qualifies.
So thousands of jobs. I think you said earlier it was like 30,000 jobs or something?
38,000, and that's just for the state of Maryland alone. And they said over half of those don't need your standard. So let's say 20,000.
But even then, that's great. So the jobs did require a bachelor's degree minimum.
Right.
And now they're saying, you know what? No, It really doesn't. Somebody just needs to tell you what to do, and you can go do it. I think there's a lot of jobs out there in this workforce that are exactly like that.
Yep.
And people are using the bachelor's degree minimum as a way to weed out people who have drive and intention. But there's people out there that got plenty of want to, but maybe didn't think college was for them, and this is a way to really go after that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
no, well said. And this opportunity at work organization that's really been providing the stats here, they estimate that there are more than 70 million people in the United States today that qualify as their STARS curriculum.
Well, this is an interesting moment in time because, and I think we need to give credit where credit's due. You wanted to say giving credit to a politician, and it's not just that Governor Hogan took the step and signed this in, but this organization that he's working with, this is not a Republican right-wing organization.
Right.
So Governor Hogan, who is a Republican governor, has reached across the aisle with an organization he probably doesn't align with 100%, but they have one tenet of what they do, the STAR program, and he says, you know what? That would be great for my constituency, for the Marylanders in the state. You actually make a good point, even though I probably don't agree with 90% of what you say. You're right on this, and let's do it. And that's incredible. That's great. Credit to Governor Hogan for recognizing that and putting this in.
Yep. Yeah. No. So I wanted to bring that up. I mean, we rag on politicians all the time, and me being a resident of the state of Maryland, I was made aware of this because of certain social media accounts and stuff that I follow. But hopefully, it's adopted by a lot of states, because you got to believe. I mean, there's a lot of states out there that are just inundated with, as you put, people with ambition and drive, but they don't have that magical piece of paper. But that certainly doesn't mean that they can't do the job.
I was trying to explain to someone last week in Alabama that the city of Baltimore taxes you when it rains. More it rains, more you get taxed. He just thought that was the most insane thing he ever heard. I was like, oh, yeah, no, it's crazy. And, so the next thing, I'm calling on Governor Hogan right now to override the Baltimore City rain tax.
Oh,
it's unconstitutional.
He butts heads with Baltimore City all the time, just constantly. And every once in a while he'll get a win, but it's like pulling teeth, man, because that's oil and water. Given his opposition, he's done a pretty good job.
Yeah, 10-4. All right, Joey, how are you going to follow that up, man? That was pretty good.
Okay, so I'm going to follow that up with probably the most exciting news to come out of SEC Media Days.
Yes. I know exactly what he was going to say.
I have no idea what he was going to say, but at our heart, this is really a college football podcast.
Yes, college football starts next month, and just to go to show everybody else in the country that it just means more in the Southeast, the SEC announced this past week at SEC Media Days that Bush's Beans is now the official beans of the SEC.
Oh, yeah, you did send me that. That's so funny. But, I mean, all jokes aside, Bush's baked beans are legit. They're delicious.
Oh, hey, tell me another bean company. You can't.
Oh, Goya beans ain't played nobody, Paul.
Yeah, Goya beans is a Pac-12 beans. Come on. And just show you how just to let everybody know how insane we are down here in the SEC country. As soon as that was announced, like, I immediately just wanted to fight every other bean company in the country because I know they wasn't worth nothing.
I'm very curious to know what it costs to become the official bean of the SEC.
Okay, let's take a bet right now. How much do you think it costs to be the official bean? Over under. I'm going to set the over under annually on a, let's say, 5-year deal. Annually, $5 million a year to be the official bean. Got the over or the under on that, Josh?
How many teams are in the SEC?
14. Well, going to be 16.
Over.
Yeah.
Over.
Yeah.
Over on $5 million a year.
Yeah.
To be the bean.
I bet.
All right, Joey, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I would go with the over too. And I honestly don't know does that take effect like immediately? I didn't get those details I would
But
assume so.
hold on a second. TV rights were like $22 million a year is what the teams were getting. So how much was the league getting? Probably double that.
Teams were getting that each, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, each team, because it'd be $250,000 per team to have a bean. Actually, I don't know. Did the teams even get a cut with that? Man, there were so many questions here.
I know.
This is a
Involved
lot
with
to
the official
unpack here.
bean. Yeah, a lot to unpack. We were not prepared.
Well, that's it. I'm going to SEC Media Days next year. That way I can have all my questions answered and ready for the Add 10 Gallons Concrete podcast. How's that? It's like, oh yeah, I'd like to register for a media credential for this. They'd probably give me one.
Yeah, we're official, boys.
I got a media credential for World of Concrete, so what's the difference? Well, I don't know how much Bush is paid, but it's likely to pay off for him, because if I know anything about SEC football fans, they are loyal to a fault. So there's plenty of people down there that choose Coke over Pepsi because that little Coke bottle is sitting there next to Nick Saban on every single interview. And so now, I mean, not that they needed any help, because they're the only bean company that I know of, but now every SEC football fan is going to have Bush's beans at the tailgate. So good for them. Good for them. But when it comes to concrete technology, your new favorite company is Brickeye Industrial, and Eric Dixhorn is going to come on here and tell you why. So now all the lawyer listeners of the Add 10 Gallons Concrete podcast are going to know what probes are going to be sticking into concrete. And that's going to be apparent to you after this episode. So without further ado, Eric Dixhorn with Brickeye Digital. All right, with us today we have Eric Van Dixhorn from Brickeye Industrial Technologies. I really appreciate you being on the show here. Why don't you give the listeners a little bit of background information about yourself, where you came from, how you got in the industry, and what led you to this position right here.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's great to be on. So my background is I attended the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and graduated with a degree in civil engineering, and then worked as a project manager for a heavy civil contractor in Wisconsin for about 8 years. So I worked on a lot of DOT projects, mainly bridge and road construction in the Milwaukee area. Then about 4 years ago, I received a call from a family friend that had a small startup that was growing very quickly. So the company was called Nitrocrete, and had developed this very unique technology that used liquid nitrogen for cooling ready-mix concrete. So we were the only ones doing it in this manner, and there was a ton of potential. So we jumped on that opportunity, and our family moved out to Colorado. Company grew like crazy. I think we had 6 employees when I had started, and then we're up to about 50 employees about a year later. So a lot of fun. Learned a lot about the ready mix industry, the concrete cooling industry, in that time. So unfortunately, with a lot of small startups that are growing quickly, the company ran into some financial issues, and I kind of saw where things were headed. So I decided to move on, and now I've been here with Brickeye for just about 6-7 months.
Oh, okay. So just recently transitioning into your role here with Brickeye, relatively speaking.
Yeah, so I was with Nitrocrete from approximately early 2019 to it was about November of 2021. So yeah, I've been with Brickeye now for 7 months.
Great. So tell us a little bit about Brickeye. What the company does, what you guys specialize in, and what products that you bring to the market and promote for the concrete industry.
Yeah, of course. And just to clarify, some people may know Brickeye as AOMS. So the company name changed officially to Brickeye about 3 months ago. So that's led to a little confusion, but so I wanted to clarify that. But yeah, Brickeye is a technology company focused on increasing efficiency and safety on construction job sites through the use of digital sensors and cloud-based software. So the company is based out of Toronto. has around 45 employees. I'm working remotely from Fort Collins, Colorado. It's probably worth mentioning that there's kind of three divisions to Brickeye. So just to give you a little background, the company was founded about 10 years ago. The three founding members met while pursuing their PhDs at the University of Ottawa, and they developed and patented this technology that uses a fiber optic cable to measure different parameters like temperature, strain, vibration, just by measuring how the light reflects as it passes through that cable. So mainly used in industrial applications, but that was kind of the foundation of the company, which at that time was AOMS, or Advanced Optomechanical Systems. So we kind of joke about what happens when three academics name a company. But then the company kind of dove into the concrete sensor market about 4 years ago, and that product line is known as Lumicon. And so Lumicon has been commercially available for around 3 to 4 years, but what I'd say what is the current model of the Lumicon sensor, which has driven a lot of the growth and success of the company, has been around for just about a year, a little over a year, so relatively new. And then also about a year ago, AOMS at the time acquired a company called Brickeye, which focused on the use of sensors and cloud-based software, mainly for vertical construction sites to help mitigate risk. So the sensors include water leak detection, vibration monitoring, air quality, noise, and a few others. So those are kind of the three legs that make up the company: the fiber optic side, the concrete sensors, and then the construction risk platform. So yeah, that gives a little bit of background on the three different divisions.
Okay, so these days especially, it seems like there's new tech companies popping up all over the place, and a lot of them have to do with concrete monitoring systems and job site monitoring services and systems. So, is the fiber optic element of what you guys do there, is that something that sets your products apart or differentiates you in that market and kind of provides you with a little bit of an edge?
No, that's a great question. So the fiber optic sensors aren't necessarily used for the construction risk platform. So the fiber optic part of it is mainly used in industrial applications. So a couple examples include measuring temperature distribution underground in cases where a site needs thermal remediation. Or it's also been used in concrete pavements to measure strain and displacement at the joints. It can also be used for measuring corrosion on steel piping. So the sensor is applied to the steel pipe, and the irregularities in the surface of that pipe can cause the sensor to track some of the movement, and in that way can indicate if there's corrosion or not on the pipe. So those are kind of a little bit separate applications for the fiber optic. The Brickeye construction risk platform, as far as what sets us apart, I don't know that there's anything that is that unique about the hardware in a sense. What sets us apart, I think, is the way that we communicate and bring connectivity from the sensors to the users. So, anyone can purchase a carbon monoxide detector or a air quality monitor, but the fact that we're able to channel those alerts to the cloud and notify the user, I think that is what kind of sets us apart.
I'm glad you brought up that element of connectivity and integration. If you talk about this emerging technology from the lens of a ready-mix provider, I mean, they have moisture probes at their plants, and then they have probes in their in their trucks that can give them information on really anything pertaining to that mix design. And there's a ton of other different plugins that they can use to gain very useful data. But the problem is nowadays, at least so far, is that it doesn't really talk to each other. Like those systems don't talk to each other in a integrated way to where you can just use one device or one platform and kind of see everything, almost like how your cell phone has apps now. It's really hard to find something. I don't even know if it exists currently that one piece of hardware that pulls all those different elements and all those different features and all the software that goes with those features just pulls everything into one contained unit that's easy and efficient to operate, especially for, say, a ready mix driver or a dispatch guy. So what's being done on that front from you and really the entire tech industry? Is there something being done to kind of streamline all of the great benefits that are being presented?
Absolutely, that's a great question, and I think it is a bit of a pain point for a lot of the users. So yeah, we have actively provided integrations with other cloud-based softwares so that the user doesn't need to open up all these different apps. They can have all the information at their fingertips in one app. And just to kind of expand on that a little bit, I think one of the things that we're working as a company is where possible, I'll call it removing the human element from the process. So, as an example, we have a water leak detection sensor that can notify the superintendent if there's a water leak at the site, and he can be alerted of that at any time, anywhere he's located. But the issue becomes, what if that superintendent is 2 hours away and can't do anything about it? So there could be a lot of water damage that can occur in that time. So the next step that we implemented was designing an automated shutoff valve that can then talk to the water sensor and turn off the water supply in the event that this water leak happens. So that's just kind of an example. It's our ongoing goal is to provide more automation and intelligence to these processes to essentially keep the human element out of the equation.
So with these products that you promote, I see a big element of your promotional verbiage or literature is safety, and you really hone in on the safety aspect and being able to save money and time and litigation long term by being proactive about certain issues that are almost inevitable to pop up on a job site within the industry. So, with those long-term benefits, sometimes it's hard to justify the immediate cost or, the immediate cost demands. So with that, what's the adoption rate like? These superintendents, these companies, are they looking for a service right offhand? Do they see the end benefits, or is that something that you kind of have to promote and really help them see the benefits long term?
I think it's just awareness to the contractor that this technology is out there and helping them understand why it may be needed. And I think that will catch up. I mean, just as an example, I think as construction projects keep getting more complex, so do the supply chains, logistics, schedules, everything a part of that. And the consequences of the insurance claims and the rework have also increased drastically. So one of the numbers that we use is that just an example for an average deductible for a water leak claim was around $25,000 5 years ago, and now it's $250,000. So I think contractors and developers, honestly, who maybe had been a little skeptical of adding technology, are now a little bit more prone to find options to kind of offset some of these risks. That on top of, I mean, I think everyone is experiencing labor shortage. It's hard to find people. It's even harder to find good people. So that has really propelled companies to find ways to get the work done by removing the human from that equation. So I think you've seen a big increase in use of drones, digital mapping, collaborative cloud-based software, autonomous equipment, and sensors. So it's a field that I see will keep continuing to grow.
All right, Eric, to this point, you've done a phenomenal job with giving me very well thought out strategic answers. But that's not what we're always about here on the Add 10 Gallons Concrete podcast. Sometimes, we like to take it off the rails a little bit.
All right.
No, not every answer needs to be justifiable. We don't ask you to state your sources or anything like that. I'm gonna ask you to speculate here. We talk a lot about the labor shortage, and I think we've talked about the labor shortage in every single episode we've had this year. It's a real concern. And we've also talked about emerging technologies taking away the human element, as you alluded to. So when we think of the labor shortage, we think about there not being enough blue collar guys that wield a shovel like Thor's hammer, and a job site full of guys with dirty fluorescent orange t-shirts and jeans and boots, and we don't have enough of those guys. That's obvious for a lot of blue collar jobs. With emerging technologies, you might be looking at a different demographic. Are we potentially seeing the backfill of the labor in the construction industry? Are we going to be backfilling that void with a different demographic of people? Maybe, your younger 20s to 30s with technological experience and background.
I think it's going to be an ongoing challenge finding people to fill these roles. I noticed the difference, give or take in the 8 years that I worked with this general contractor. It just became increasingly difficult to find labor. And so I think just as the rules of economics are going to play out, it's going to be much of a supply and demand. I think the cost of labor is going to continue to increase. And I've had the opportunity to travel some, and it's been interesting to see how the economics play out. So I visited a ready-mix plant down in Mexico. So labor down there is cheaper, and on an average ready-mix plant, they had probably about 15 employees, and that included a number of laborers just using shovels and wheelbarrows to pick up aggregate that spilled over the side, clean up the site. Where in the U.S. you would have a couple guys and a skid steer providing the same type of work. And now, even more extreme, I also spent some time down in Australia with a previous company I worked for, and labor down there is even more expensive than the U.S. So it's kind of even more obvious that they put a large emphasis on using equipment and using robotics to perform a lot of the work that maybe people would. So I think the trend is going to continue to go that way. And you talked about, is the new generation going to be flying drones and using remote controls to drive equipment instead of physically using a shovel or jumping in a piece of machinery? And I think it's going to be headed that route.
That's kind of what I'm seeing as well. Back to the speculatory things that we like to do here. My biggest question is, how do we get people with that skill set interested in the trades and interested on being on a job site? And I tell you what, we see a lot. We've interviewed a few people that are with and involved in the 3D concrete printing industry.
Yeah.
And essentially, you have MIT nerds who can make a robot pour concrete, but they don't know anything about being on a concrete job site. And then you have foremen that they don't even speak the same language. So,
right.
The guys who want the house being built speak a totally different language than the MIT guys. And I apologize for calling them nerds. It's an endearing term. It's my show. I can do what I want. They've been called worse, I'm sure, but they probably make 5 times more than I do, so they shouldn't care. Uh, but yeah, it's just a completely different language, I guess you could say. Um, so that communication barrier, is that something that you guys see with your products on a job site as well?
Yes, definitely, and I think that's that's one of the reasons that I joined Brickeye. The company has a ton of smart people in it, very knowledgeable about sensors, networks, electronics, but they didn't have a lot of experience in construction or the concrete industry. So I think I've had the opportunity to kind of see both sides of it, working as a project manager, deal with everyone from laborers, carpenters, all the way up to the project executives with the owner. So just a lot of opportunity to have different types of conversations. I think that's helped me in my career as I learned to communicate with different types of people. But yeah, it's definitely very much a skill. You get a you get a nerd like you described trying to talk to a batchman at a concrete plant about doing a certain thing, and he's just going to look at them and walk away. And I've experienced that, so it definitely is a challenge.
So how much does the batchman, let's stick with that example. How much does the batchman influence the new products and the new software that you guys are developing? Do you develop the mechanism and then try to make it to where it's easy to use, or do you develop it with the batchman in mind?
So most of our products, at least with Brickeye, we don't target the ready mix plants a whole lot. Most of the applications for our concrete sensors are used out in the field. I'd say the majority of the users are contractors. I guess there's some cases where we're supplying to a testing firm or the ready mix supplier. But to kind of answer your question, I think that the end goal is probably not driven off of the desires of the batchman or the laborer that may be installing the sensors, but it has to be designed in a way that it's easy for them to use. So the design is done based on ASTM standards and what the owner and engineer the specifications require. And we love the idea of adding more bells and whistles to make everything, more intelligent. But at the end of the day, we also have to realize who's using it. So it's kind of a fine line of making the product user friendly, but at the same time providing all of the features that would make it smart.
You kind of alluded to making it usable. Is it becoming more usable over time just naturally by you guys striving to do so? I guess my example would be back in the 90s, you had to know MS DOS in order to get a computer to work, and now you just turn a thing on and it's a touchsame now, essentially.
Right.
Like now you have 3-year-olds that can work a MacBook just as well as my mom can. It's a generational thing. but is it is the technology in the construction industry progressing in the same way that it did in for consumer objects such as PCs?
I think it is. When I started in the industry, just as an example, the crews were filling out their timesheets with paper and then handing it over to the foreman, and that quickly evolved to being done on Microsoft Excel, and then the next step was an app on their phone, and I think most cases, even the laborers, batchmen, a lot of the workers on the site are very capable of using technology, and I think it's evolved and it's headed that way. And I think many of them have embraced it. So that's kind of, we keep those things in mind as we design our software and our equipment. Like for example, our concrete sensor are very much dependent on using the app. So It's very user friendly. The app looks and feels and is similar to other apps that they may use for, let's say, an Uber or ordering food or whatever the case may be. It makes the user experience very easy.
Well, with that being said, I mean, I'm going to ask you to theorize again. I don't know if you like doing this or not. I can't tell yet. But what can we look for in the future in this rapidly evolving industry where, I mean, in less than a decade, you've gone from a piece of paper to an app. What's on the horizon? Give us something. What's going to wow us in 5 years?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So our concrete sensors are generally used for one of two applications. One of them is for the use of maturity, so the user can see in real time what the strength or the estimated strength of that concrete is. So, you know, in the past, without maturity, you don't know what the strength of that concrete is until you break a cylinder. So now with maturity, you have that ability. But, looking forward with enough data, the right algorithm and the right variables, you should be able to start to predict what the concrete strength will be, and it should be able to tell you when it's gonna meet that required strength. So kind of a silly example, but think about putting a steak on the grill. So in the kind of the conventional old days, you would just look at it. You might take a knife, slice it open. You might take a bite of it to make sure that it's cooked. So now we have temperature sensors that you can put in your steak, and it tells you, yep, it reached a certain temperature, it's ready to go. So that I kind of equate to maturity. But now even taking it one step further, there's smart sensors and smart grills where you throw your steak on the grill, and based on the temperature of the grill and how you want it cooked and the size of that steak, it can pretty much tell you, hey, your steak's going to be ready in 18 minutes. So you can walk away, do something else, come back, and it is done. So I kind of see the same type of advancement with maturity for the future. So you're using kind of predictive analytics to help the user be smarter. So that's one example. I think another aspect of it is what I mentioned earlier, just kind of removing the human element out of it. So I can give you a personal example from working on some of these bridge projects. We had a project where we had to pour a bunch of decks in the wintertime. So we had, being in Wisconsin in cold weather, we had to monitor the temperatures of that deck to make sure it didn't freeze. So that was accomplished by using a little high-low thermometer that was purchased at the hardware store, and it required a foreman to drive in, check the temperature, check to see if it was within the threshold that it was supposed to be, and if it was starting to get too cold, he'd have to turn on these ground heater hoses that we use that we lay across the deck with blankets to heat that deck up. So if you think about that process, right, he's got to drive in, he's got to check the thermometer, he's got to decide if that ground heater needs to be turned on or not. Then he's got to come back, check it again, maybe turn it off. Where ideally you have a thermometer in that concrete that can tell you in real time wherever he's located what the temperature is. So we have that currently. But then the next step is having that thermometer, that sensor, talk to that ground heater so it can turn on automatically, and the foreman doesn't need to be driving back and forth. So that comes back to again, removing the human element with there is limited labor taking advantage of technology. So none of these concepts are necessarily overly complex. It's just connecting the dots with the information.
Right, and then being able to record all that information too, right? I mean, that all of that
Yep.
data, I'm sure, is invaluable. Um, what kind of initiative or what kind of directive, either from your company or your customers, do you have as far as capturing the emissions and CO2 side of things? Whether it be, if you can somehow record the amount of distance that foreman isn't driving compared to when he was, or the amount of emissions that the concrete is emitting. I mean, what part what part do you guys play in the recording and mitigation of overall CO2 emissions in the concrete industry, which is I would say the biggest topic of conversation now overall?
Yeah, I agree that is the topic that is being discussed. I think most of the initiative revolves around ways of optimizing mix designs so you can reduce the amount of cement in the mix. I think a lot of companies are doing this. The idea being that with maturity, you can achieve your strengths at earlier days than you would otherwise using cylinders. So in many cases, if you're not using maturity, the contractor says, hey, I want to meet my strengths in 2 days, so I want a mix that can hit 3,000 psi in 2 days. So in many cases, that mix is over-designed. So that is definitely one element that we're pursuing, is just awareness of the use of maturity and its ability to help reduce those CO2 emissions. But yeah, you nailed it on the head. There's a lot of other areas as well, like with the heating example. So some of our construction risk sensors are used in mainly vertical construction applications where they may be using propane heaters to either preheat the forming zone or post-heat that concrete once it's been placed. And in many cases, they just leave it turned on and they just don't shut it off. But yeah, being able to use intelligence on, okay, this deck is warm enough, we're not in any danger of getting too cold, let's turn that heater off. So that's definitely something we're looking at, is how to capture and quantify some of the emissions that are saved with by automating equipment to turn on and off when it's needed and not just leaving it on all the time.
You talk about all the things that you guys can do as far as, quantifying and mitigating CO2 emissions and recording it, and the entire industry is really honed in on those issues. But the entire industry is also inundated with a lot of other technology companies out there that either do or claim to do a lot of the same things that Brickeye and Lumicon is claiming to do. And personal story, if you've been to the World of Concrete the last time or the last two times, even now, they have an entire hall devoted to the technology side of concrete, whereas it used to be the smallest segment. And it used to be equipment was the biggest room, and then technology was the smallest little corner. And now it's almost, the technology building is almost just as big as the equipment building. So with all that being said, it seems to be that the technology aspect of the concrete industry right now is really the Wild West. You have a lot of startups, and then you have a lot of new players entering the market at all times. So with that long-winded lead in to my direct question here is, what sets you guys apart? What can you say you guys do that would entice people to go with your software and your hardware over competitors?
Yeah, absolutely. You bring up a very valid point. When I was at World of Concrete a few months ago, I think I counted eight concrete sensor companies within about a 500-foot radius of our booth. So it's like, good grief, there are a lot of them out there. But so every system is a little bit different with how it's set up. I mean, some use Bluetooth, some use long-range radio frequencies, others use cell phone coverage, some are these embeddable sensors, some are reusable. So there's kind of a variety of different types of architectures that all with essentially the same goal. So the way that our system is set up is that it includes, or it consists of a sacrificial cable that connects to a reusable node. And what is unique about our system is that we're the only ones out there that use a relatively small and really affordable node that transmits that data directly to the cloud. So you plug the cable into the node and you can get updates directly to your phone, where most other systems out there would require some type of centralized hub or gateway that receive the data from the sensors and then transfer it up to the cloud. So in that way, our system is very much plug and play, and caters very well for ease of use. Another thing that sets us apart is we're the only ones that have a cable in which you can add multiple sensors on it. So if you think about a concrete element that needs to be monitored, in many cases, let's say it would require 3 sensors, one in the center, one on the outside, and one on the top. So for most cases, that would require them putting in 3 individual cables to monitor those locations. The advantage of our system with being able to put multiple sensors on the same cable, you can get away with one cable that just reduces the amount of installation and management of those wires. So that's another aspect that where we can differentiate ourselves compared to some of our competitors.
Being able to use less equipment, right? Because there's a lot of throwaway from what I've seen, and very unprofessional viewpoint of things, but just being on job sites, there's a lot of sacrificial equipment that goes into these, the monitoring process. So if you're able to just be more efficient with that, I mean, that helps all parties involved. That's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It does help reduce the price point on it. You don't need as many nodes to accomplish the same goal. Mm-hmm.
Well, Eric, we really appreciate your time and all the information you've been able to give to the show. I mean, we're huge tech nerds on the Add 10 Gallons Concrete podcast. Anytime we get to talk tech and what can be around the corner and how the industry is becoming more and more efficient, we really enjoy doing so. But we also enjoy talking about what can and has gone wrong. And usually it's not in a modern day setting. Usually it's in people using archaic technologies on a job site and being relatively unsafe. So as a man that prides himself on technology and making the job site safer and more efficient, I want to hear your best, craziest thing you've ever seen on a job site story. You have some pretty stiff competition. So far, we've had guests that have been on a job site. It was an expansion project and for a hospital, and one particular mental ward patient got loose and was running around the job site naked. We've actually had a few stories that have involved nudity. That's not a prerequisite, by the way, but it seems to be where everyone kind of gravitates towards. But with all that being said, give us a good story, man.
Yeah, so I have a couple, and I'll get through the first one. I guess you can tell me if I have time or not to dive into the second. But so the first one involved, we were doing a bridge replacement over a river, and this is in southeast Wisconsin. And all of a sudden, a little single prop plane had a crash landing in the river, just a couple hundred yards upstream of where the job site was. So the plane somehow managed to kind of float down the river and kind of park itself next to our job site. So we rushed over and check on the pilot. Thankfully he was totally okay, but he was kind of like distressed about how he was going to get his plane out of the river. And so he looked at us and saw that we had a 150-ton crane sitting right next to the bridge, and he's like, "Hey, can I use your crane to pull my plane out?" I'm kind of look at him, I'm like, "Well, it's not a bad idea, honestly." So I called up our safety department, and they had me write out a quick kind of letter that indemnified us in the event that anything went wrong. But sure enough, he rigged up his plane, and we hooked onto it and pulled this little plane out of the river with this 150-ton crane. So it's pretty funny. I don't think we even charged him anything for it, but he gave us like $100 or something. So that was the guy's beer money for the night. So yeah, that's pretty funny.
You talk about being lucky and unlucky all at the same time. First, you got to crash land your plane, so you're at a loss there. But then all of a sudden, you find yourself next to a crane. Like, hey, you guys want to do me a solid and pull me out of here?
Yeah, it worked out for him. Yeah, thankfully, he did not get hurt, and there was a crane right next to his plane. So
Awesome. That's a good one. I'll give you credit. That's at least top 5 for us, and it did not involve
Nudity.
it did not involve nudity or substance abuse, and it's still in the top 5. So that is wholesome entertainment there. We appreciate it. What else you got? You got another one for me?
Yeah, so the next one honestly doesn't even have a whole lot to do with construction. It's just kind of a funny, one of my most memorable experiences of working in the construction industry. And is it Joey he's a hunter, right? So I think he would have appreciated this story.
Yeah.
But
He'll listen to this. He's a
okay.
professional hunter, and he's a part-time concrete guy. It was we joke with him about.
Nice. Yeah, so it was about 10 years ago. We got a new dog, a new puppy that I was planning on using for hunting. It's an upland bird hunting dog. It's a Hungarian Vizsla. And so I was pretty intent on training this thing. So I had a lot more time back then. I did not have any kids at the time. So the way that I wanted to train it was you use live birds, and we had some training grounds close to our house, and you usually buy these quail or pheasants, and you place them out in this field. You let the dog run around. He smells them. He goes on point. You kind of go over. You kick the bush. The bird flies out. You shoot a couple blanks, just to get the dog used to the sound of the gun and being around the birds. But I was also pretty cheap, so I didn't want to pay for purchasing all these quail and pheasants from the pheasant farm. So at the same time, we were doing a project in downtown Milwaukee that consisted of installing concrete overlays on dozens of bridges, and all this work had to be done at night just because of the lane closures. So while I was down in downtown Milwaukee at night, I noticed that there's like hundreds, thousands of pigeons underneath these bridges. So I'm like, well, I wonder if I could use them. So so it turned out that I started trapping a number of these pigeons, and I do that by I joined the crew for the safety huddle, got them going, and then assuming everything was going right with the pour, I was able to drag our foreman down underneath the bridge, and we'd spend a couple hours just catching pigeons using a big fishing net. And we looked totally legit because we had PPE on, we had the trucks with the strobe lights, so we looked like we were there for a purpose. But I put the birds in a cage in the trunk of my car, went home, and then and I would use all these pigeons for training my dog. So just in case any of your listeners are concerned, there was no pigeons that were harmed in this process. In fact, I felt like I was doing them a service by removing them from the city and kind of transferring them out to this beautiful nature preserve. So that
I don't think we have that kind of audience, Eric. You can speak freely here.
So yeah, that was definitely one of the highlights of my career with the bridge construction company. So.
That's a work perk story. That's what we need to do. We need to transition. We need to either start a new segment or transition this one into, from what's the craziest thing to what's the biggest work perk you've ever had to enjoy while being on a job site.
I'm sure you get some good stories. Yeah, I don't think I told my bosses about it until maybe a few years later. I didn't feel comfortable enough sharing that I was using company resources for trapping pigeons for my own personal use.
It's all right. You got your work done first. You
right.
You prefaced the story with, after the safety brief and everything was going good, then I went and got my birds.
Yeah, so good times.
Well, good stuff, man. Well, we really appreciate your time, all your insight and knowledge. It was a fantastic episode, and we really appreciate you being on. And if we can have you on again in the future, after robots take over the world, you can come on the podcast and tell us about it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun. So appreciate it.
Yep, likewise, man. All right, man. Take care.
Yep. Bye.